Picture this. September 1929. A financial analyst named Roger Babson stands up at a business conference and says 7 words that will make him the most hated man on Wall Street. There is a crash coming, and it will be terrific. The room laughs at him. Newspapers mock him publicly. Leading economists call him an embarrassment. The stock market actually rises the next day as if to prove him wrong. 30 days later, the entire financial system of the most powerful country on earth collapsed overnight. 9,000 banks failed. 13 million people lost their jobs. Families who had spent decades building wealth watched it disappear in 72 hours. And here is the thing that nobody is saying out loud right now. Every single warning sign that Roger Babson identified in September 1929 is present, right now, today. I'm your host at the Hidden Wealth Archaeologist. We dig through history so you don't repeat it. And today's excavation might be the most important one we've done yet. Before we dig in, understand what this video is and what it isn't. This is not a prediction. This channel does not tell you what will happen. We are not fortune tellers. We are forensic historians. What we do is examine documented historical patterns with the same cold precision a coroner examines a body. No emotion, no agenda, just evidence. And the evidence we are about to walk through comes from Federal Reserve historical records, Congressional testimony from 1929 and 1930, peer-reviewed economic research, and documented survivor accounts from people who lived through the Great Depression. By the end of this video, you will have seen the 5 most dangerous parallel patterns between 1929 and right now. And you will understand exactly which assets protected families during the last time this pattern played out completely. Not theory, historical fact. Let's dig. If this is your first excavation with us, hit subscribe and the notification bell right now. Every single week we dig through a different financial collapse from history and extract the lessons that actually matter. It's completely free. Unlike the financial education they deliberately kept out of your school. Now back to 1929. The first pattern, debt. In 1929, Americans had discovered something that felt like a financial superpower, buying on margin. Here is how it worked. You want to buy $100 worth of stock. You only need $10 of your own money. You borrow the other $90 from your broker. The stock goes up. You profit on the full $100 while only risking $10. It felt like free money. Between 1926 and 1929, margin debt, money borrowed to buy stocks, exploded by over 50%. Ordinary Americans, factory workers, teachers, farmers, were borrowing money they didn't have to buy stocks at prices that assumed infinite growth. A Senate investigation later called it a pyramid of debt built on a foundation of sand. When the market dropped just 11% in a single day in October 1929, brokers called in those loans simultaneously. People who had borrowed $90 to buy a $100 stock suddenly owed $90 on an asset worth $50. They were wiped out, not gradually, overnight. Now here is the parallel that should make you stop scrolling. United States national debt today stands at $36 trillion. That number is so large most people simply cannot process it. So let me make it human. In 2020, 4 years ago, that number was 23 trillion. It grew by $13 trillion in 4 years. $13 trillion in 4 years. Consumer credit card debt in America just hit $1.17 trillion. for the first time in history. The average American household carries $11,000 in credit card debt at an average interest rate of 21%. And margin debt, money borrowed specifically to buy stocks, has returned to near record levels as the market has climbed to all-time highs. The Senate investigator who described 1929 as a pyramid of debt built on sand. He would recognize the foundation immediately. The second pattern, market concentration. In 1929, the American stock market was not actually driven by hundreds of healthy companies performing well. It was driven by a handful of stocks that had become almost mythologically popular. Radio Corporation of America, what we would call the technology stock of its era, rose over 500% between 1925 and 1929. General Motors, Montgomery Ward, these were the stocks every newspaper talked about. Every barbershop debated. Every ordinary American wanted to own. They represented a tiny fraction of listed companies but drove the vast majority of market gains. When they fell, they took everything with them. Radio Corporation of America fell 97% from its peak. 97%. An investor who put $1,000 into the most exciting technology company of 1929 had $30 left at 1932. Now look at today. 7 companies, Microsoft, Apple, Nvidia, Amazon, Google, Meta, and Tesla, represent approximately 30% of the entire S&P 500 index. 30% of the most widely tracked market index in the world concentrated in 7 companies. When ordinary Americans invest in index funds, which most retirement accounts do automatically, they are unknowingly betting 30 cents of every dollar on 7 technology companies. Nvidia alone rose over 800% between 2022 and 2024. History rhymes with uncomfortable precision. The concentration that preceded the 1929 collapse was dangerous because when confidence in those few dominant stocks broke, there was nowhere for the market to hide. Today's concentration creates identical structural fragility, not a prediction, a pattern, the third pattern, banks that look strong until they don't. Here is something the history books rarely explain clearly about 1929. The stock market crash was not actually the disaster. The disaster was what happened to the banks 18 months later. In 1930 and 1931, after the crash, ordinary Americans who had survived the initial market collapse began quietly withdrawing money from their bank accounts. Not dramatically, just cautiously, moving savings somewhere they felt safer. But banks in 1929 had done something that made those withdrawals catastrophic. They had invested depositor savings in the same stocks that had just collapsed. When depositors wanted their money back, the banks didn't have it. It was sitting in worthless stock certificates. Bank runs began. One bank failing caused depositors at the next bank to panic and withdraw their savings. That bank failed, causing the next one to collapse. 9,000 banks failed in 3 years, wiping out the savings of millions of Americans who had never owned a single stock. The money simply disappeared now. March 2023. Silicon Valley Bank, the 16th largest bank in the United States, collapsed in 48 hours. The second largest bank failure in American history. Depositors tried to withdraw $42 billion in a single day. 2 days later, Signature Bank collapsed. Days after that, First Republic Bank failed, eventually becoming the second largest bank failure in American history. 3 major bank failures in 30 days. The official explanation was that these were isolated incidents, unique circumstances, not systemic. In 1930, the official explanation for the first wave of bank failures was also that they were isolated incidents. History does not always repeat, but it rhymes with uncomfortable precision. The fourth pattern: wealth inequality at historic extremes. This one is backed by hard data that very few people are discussing. In 1928, 1 year before the crash, the top 1% of Americans owned 49% of all financial wealth in the country. 49%. Nearly half of all financial assets concentrated in 1% of the population. Economists who study the Great Depression have identified this concentration as one of the key structural vulnerabilities that made the collapse so devastating. When the wealthy lost confidence and pulled back spending, there was no broad middle class with enough financial cushion to maintain economic activity. The entire system depended on the confidence of a tiny group of people at the top. When that confidence broke, it broke everything. Now here is the data point that genuinely stopped me when I found it. According to Federal Reserve data published in 2024, the top 1% of Americans currently own 47% of all financial wealth. We have returned to within 2 percentage points of the most extreme wealth concentration ever recorded in American history. The same structural vulnerability that economists identified as a key factor in why 1929 became the Great Depression exists today at almost identical levels. This is not political commentary. This is documented economic data from the Federal Reserve itself. The pattern is mathematical, not ideological. The fifth pattern, and this one is the most disturbing. The warnings being ignored. Roger Babson was not the only person who saw 1929 coming. Paul Warburg, one of the founders of the Federal Reserve itself, warned in March 1929 that if the orgies of unrestrained speculation are permitted to spread, the ultimate collapse is certain to bring about a general depression. He was called unpatriotic. Newspapers said he was trying to undermine American confidence. The economist John Kenneth Galbraith documented how the social pressure to remain optimistic became so powerful that rational warnings were systematically dismissed as pessimism, or worse, as deliberate attempts to cause panic.